Ghost Hunting in New England,
your favorite spooky podcast.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome to this week's episode of Ghost Hunting in New England with your hosts, Amelia
and Beth.
And today we are talking about something very cool and interesting.
We are continuing our adventure along the eastern coast of Massachusetts as we look at different haunted, spooky things that you can do and visit and things that have happened. So thanks for coming along with us.
So today we're doing haunted houses of the North Shore.
Yeah. Well,
And
some haunted houses and a street.
So Beth, would you like to go first?
I would. But before I start out, I want to say that I was thinking about something earlier today. We want you to leave us a 5-star review on Audible, on podcasts, on wherever you can leave us a review, on Facebook, everywhere you can leave us a review. Please, folks, reach out and leave reviews because Amelia is feeling very sad that she doesn't have more reviews to read.
Yeah, leave us a review. And if you leave one on Facebook, make sure you make it public so we can see it. And only leave us 5 stars. Please don't leave us 4 stars. That's just rude.
The first place that I want to talk about is the S.K. Pierce Mansion in Gardner, Massachusetts.
Ooh.
Amelia, did you know that Gardner, Massachusetts is called Chair City?
I did not know that.
Do you know why it's called Chair City?
Nope.
Because during the late 1800s, there was a huge furniture making industry that came up all over Gardner, out by Leominster, Fitchburg, that general area. And a lot of the industry was actually driven by a guy named Sylvester Knowlton Pierce and his furniture company. He was the founder of the S.K. Pierce and Sons Furniture Company. And as the company was taking off and making all sorts of profits in the 1870s, he decided to build a home that, quote, suited a man of his stature, which I took to mean that he wanted to show off how rich he was, not how tall he was. Although there are 11-foot ceilings throughout the mansion, so who knows?
Maybe he was really fat. Did it have an extra big bathtub?
I didn't find any information about the dimensions of the bathtub.
Dang.
So the building is incredibly detailed and ornate. It's not quite French King fancy, but it took over a year and a half and 100 men working full time to finish it in 1875. It's got 10 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and reportedly, listen to this, 68 closets.
Whoa, cool. Those
Right?
are my dreams.
My house is seriously lacking in closet space. And when I saw 68 closets, I got all sorts of warm and fuzzy, happy feelings. Like I could definitely fill up those closets with a bunch of my crap. Anyway, it's almost 7,000 square feet. It's 3 full stories with a widow's walk / cupola up on the where the 4th floor would be. It's painted a puke green color with black shutters and maroon trim. And everywhere
cool.
you look,
I like that. Can I say something really quick? That has nothing to do with anything. I was driving through Weymouth last week down Pleasant Street, and there was a house. I looked over. I was driving down. I was going to the Whole Foods. I looked to my left. There was a house that the shutters were closed on the top floor. When do you ever see a house with closed shutters?
Never.
It was so weird. It like almost reminded me of it looked like it belonged to like a Tim Burton movie. Like it was so weird. It was a white house with black closed shutters. I pointed out to Paul. I was like, what the? It was only on the top half of the house. Anyway, I'm sorry. It just popped into my head. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Everywhere you look all over the S.K. Pierce mansion, it's covered with just hand carved woodwork. So these 100 guys that worked there, they weren't just like laborers showing up. They were like skilled craftsmen who were really building a terrific Victorian home. I read it has been described as both an Addams family home or as Norman Bates' mother's house, right? From Psycho.
Cool.
So yeah, it's very creepy looking. And looking at the pictures of it, it has everything that you would ever want in a haunted house. Do you want to know something even more amazing?
Yes.
There's a tunnel.
Cool.
It goes from the basement of the home underneath the street to the basement of the furniture factory across the road, which is the furniture factory that S.K. Pierce owned. The tunnel has been blocked off, but it doesn't say that it's been filled in or that it's completely inaccessible. It just says it's been blocked off. So I bet that if we were very, very tenacious,
if we pulled the right book on the bookcase,
yeah, I bet that we could actually get in there.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's very, very New England. And because as we've talked about in a lot of our episodes here in New England, when places were built, they build tunnels underneath to get from building to building so that you don't have to go outside in the winter, or apparently in the summer when it's really hot and gross either, but mainly in the winter. Okay. So while S.K. Pierce lived there, he was known to host all sorts of important people at his dinner parties. His guests included U.S. presidents, famous artists, wealthy industrialists, and he was widely known to host Freemasons meetings in the basement.
Cool.
Unfortunately, S.K. Pierce's wife, Susan, was not always in attendance since she died of a mysterious bacterial infection several weeks after they moved into their new home. So Pierce and his wife and their son moved in, and she almost immediately fell ill and had some sort of bacteria. And this was the 1870s. So penicillin was not a thing yet. So sorry, you died. After he had a proper mourning period, which I believe is about a year, Pierce remarried a woman 30 years younger than him. Her name was Ellen, and they had 2 sons. So now he is finally the furniture company of S.K. Pierce and Sons. Before that, it was just one son.
How old was he that he could marry a woman 30 years younger than him?
He was old enough. He was probably in his 50s. Anyway, he didn't live there for too long because in 1888, he died. Ellen took over the management of the company and the mansion, although it was a bit of a battle because Pierce's sons, they didn't all get along and they didn't like Ellen. And so there was friction. Ellen lived until 1902, after which...
Did Ellen kill him?
I have no information about if Ellen killed him or not. None.
Probably.
I cannot confirm nor deny.
30 years younger and then took over his business and his mansion?
Yeah, but they were married for like 12 years. And she had to fight with his sons every step of the way. Anyway, she lived until 1902. And the 3 sons continued to squabble over the assets after that. Apparently, the older son he took over the family business, the furniture company. And the younger son, Edward, actually took over the mansion after the Great Depression, or during the Great Depression, because the family fortune just evaporated. Nobody was buying furniture. There was no money for anything. So Edward takes over the mansion and he opens it up as a boarding house, quotes around boarding house, where all sorts of terrible things took place. There was gambling, there was prostitution, and there was murder. It was that kind of place, right? Great place. Anyway, okay, so we have... You want to hear about the murders?
Yeah.
All right. So we have a prostitute allegedly strangled to death in the mansion. There's a room on the 2nd floor known as the Red Room. Like Amelia is sitting right now in the Red Room at her house.
Soon to be Black Room.
And the prostitute, her ghost, as well as her murderer's ghost, are known to make appearances in that room. The prostitute is the 3rd person known to have died in that room since Pierce's first 2 wives, both Susan and Ellen, had died in that room. Right? Apparently that's the room you go to die in that house, but maybe not. Hang on. This is the sad one. Okay. A murder that supposedly happened was the drowning of a young man or a young boy. I couldn't quite get the details right, in the cistern in the basement. And now when I saw this information, everything clearly said that the boy was being drowned. Not that the boy drowned. I thought that was an important detail because it means that he was murdered. He didn't accidentally fall in and couldn't get out. Somebody held him under until he couldn't breathe anymore. So that's pretty awful. I wasn't really inclined to search for a lot of information on that one because that's just sad. I don't like when kids get murdered. Anyway, moving on.
Or die in general.
Well, yeah, right. But especially
remember we did that one episode where everyone died in a cistern and we didn't plan it that way.
No, which one was that? I don't remember that.
It was haunted. Yeah, it was Cape in the Islands. When we did haunted spots, the Cape and the Islands, like 3 kids, all separate stories. It was weird.
Well, apparently falling in a well and dying was a very common way to go. All right. There's reportedly an incident where an immigrant was burned to death in the master bedroom. Now, this is super interesting. Okay. Stick with me. The man was from Finland. So I'm going to butcher his name terribly, but it was Eno Sari. He was a World War II veteran and he'd relocated here to the US. He was 47 years old when he stayed at the mansion in 1963. And there are reports that he didn't just die in a fire, but that he spontaneously combusted.
Cool.
And this is based on the lack of any fire damage to the room around him. Like it was just him.
I'm really into that.
I am too. And I remember being a kid and it was one of the first things that drew me to like paranormal stuff was stories of like spontaneous combustion. Cause I was always sort of afraid that maybe I would burst into flames randomly someday.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would like in the future to do a full episode on spontaneous combustion because it's super interesting. All right. In full disclosure, though, I did read another article that says the spontaneous combustion story is nonsense, and he actually fell asleep smoking in bed. His cause of death.
Unfortunately, that's most spontaneous combustion stories.
Yeah, it's true. His cause of death is officially listed as 3rd-degree burns and smoke inhalation, but that's nowhere
smoke
near.
What?
Smoke inhalation. What did I say?
Installation.
Oh, no, not installation, inhalation. But there's nowhere near as interesting as spontaneous combustion, which is just fascinating.
And a better story.
Right. Public service announcement. If you are still smoking, you should quit smoking. But most importantly, don't smoke in bed. Please don't smoke in bed. Like if you're smoking, you should have your feet on the floor.
Yeah. Don't smoke in bed.
Right. And it's just for basic safety. Like you don't want to burn yourself and then have people talking about you 50 years later about whether you spontaneously combusted or not. I want to read you this information from the S.K. Pierce Mansion's website about who is haunting the mansion and what spooky things they're doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Guests have experienced everything from voices, chanting, full body apparitions, moving furniture, screens flying off windows, slamming doors, the sounds of footsteps on the stairs and halls, sudden temperature changes, foul odors, shadow people, and an ominous lion's roar, which can shake the house, which many believe is the former Mr. Pierce imposing his displeasure with the current state of the home and its residents. Others have felt the pressure of hands actually pushing them. One visitor felt that a presence was attempting to push her down the steps, while another was almost forced out of a 3rd-floor window. Paranormal experts have said that the entities in this mansion are the, quote, most advanced, end quote, they have ever seen, as they are capable of harnessing electrical energy and converting that power into the ability to move large objects and impose their will physically on their current surroundings. So, wow.
Cool.
It's a lot of activity for one 7,000 square foot house. So who is doing all these hauntings? All right. Again, this is more from the S.K. Pierce Mansion's website. The ghosts of S.K. Pierce himself, Susan Pierce, Edward Pierce, as well as a nanny named Maddie Cornwell, a gentleman named David, who some believe to have been the Red Room strangler, the prostitute who was murdered in the Red Room, a young boy, a younger girl who was perhaps the granddaughter of Pierce, Eno Sari, the man who spontaneously combusted, and some unnamed dark entities in the basement have been described as some of this mansion's many ghostly residents. Maybe I take back that we go into the basement and try to get into the tunnel if there's nasty, unpleasant, ghostly residents in the basement. A little bit more recent happenings there. The mansion was purchased in 2015 by Dark Carnival to restore and open as a tourist attraction. Right. And there's a plan to open only the basement to visitors at this time while the upper floors are being worked on. Dark Carnival's plan is to use actors to transform the basement into more of a classic haunted house experience.
Man, these people got to watch that movie. What's that movie I like that this like is exactly like it?
I have
Come
no
on,
idea.
what's that movie? Yeah, come on. What's it called? Haunted House LLC. For those who haven't seen Haunted House LLC, let me tell you, it's a so-so movie that will stay with you the rest of your life. Lauren told me to watch it, and I was like, Lauren, I mean, I love her. Lauren, if you're listening, I love you so much. But like, terrible. It gives me like the absolute worst movie and TV recommendations. Just garbage. She kept bringing up this movie. Finally, I'm like, fine, I'll watch this stupid movie. And I watched it. And it's scary. It's scary. It's like so when you're watching it, you will never enjoy going to a haunted house ever again.
Okay.
And
Well,
this is the whole setup to it.
So and it's interesting that you had such an immediate reaction because I also had an immediate reaction to it. And it was that I was thinking back to Don DeCristofaro telling us about the haunted ghost ship that they had on board the USS Salem and how it was having all sorts of seances and it was just really getting out of control. And they ended up having to shut the whole thing down like halfway through Halloween season because it was just getting dangerous. People were getting hurt. Yeah. It was bad. If you don't remember that, it was in season 3. So go on back and check out that episode. So you want to know something very weird?
Yeah.
They reportedly bought the mansion in 2015, but the website still says they don't have a planned opening date, right? So it's like 6 years they've been having this plan to open it to the public and do the basement, but it's not happening. So I'm not sure how 6 years goes by and you've bought this expensive mansion.
People are still investigating there though.
Although it did say check their social media. And since I turned off all my social media, I wasn't willing to do that.
Yeah, because I see other people on social media going there all the time.
Oh, cool.
In fact, Christy Parrish, when she was on our show, we had to do that interview really fast because she was on her way there.
Really?
Yes. And I think I saw GBPA go there this summer too.
Awesome. So apparently don't go to their website. It's not updated enough. Anyway, so before you go in though, there's actually a disclaimer and it's posted online, but listen to what the visitors have to sign off on. All right. This is great. Note, this attraction is not for the faint of heart. There is a good possibility that you will witness paranormal activity. The entities in this mansion are extremely advanced and have demonstrated a unique ability to impose their will physically on guests. For this reason, a detailed injury waiver must be signed by each guest prior to experiencing the SK Haunted Victorian Mansion. Please do not behave in an antagonistic manner toward these entities at any time, as you may be placing yourself and other guests in danger.
Spooky. That's like Zach Bagans' Haunted Object Museum out in Las Vegas. They have a very similar waiver.
Oh, well, maybe that's where this place got the idea for it. So while that's all crazy, I wanted to tell you one more story about that before we move on.
Okay.
All right. So in 2008, the home was purchased by Edward Gonzalez and Lillian Otero, and they're both confirmed skeptics. The house had been on the market a while when they bought it, and since there was that big real estate crash in 2008, they must have gotten it for a steal. Except Lillian began to hear things. At first, it was a whisper here or a soft chant there, but it was persistent and it evolved. Before long, she was listening to regular screaming from nowhere and unseen hands pounding on the walls. She and Edward began to see full-body apparitions that would beckon to them and call their names. In the most terrifying sequence of events, Lillian was told by a spirit in the home to go into a corner of the basement and begin to dig. She went to the basement and began to dig where she was told to. And what do you think she found?
A human skull.
Close. Human bones. Cool. A child's pelvis bone.
Yuck.
Ugh. So Lillian told the whole story to Joni Mahan, who wrote a book about it called Bones in the Basement. And the story is now downloaded to my Audible, and I will be listening to it this week. And so if there are any new updates from it, I will have them for you next week. So if you have the time and inclination to go by, you can find the S.K. Pierce Victorian Mansion at 4 West Broadway in Gardner, Massachusetts.
Cool. Good story.
Thanks. I think that it would be worth taking a drive out there, especially since it's leaf peeping season.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
So what do you got?
My story is the Picman House. Picman House. Picman House. You can't, I don't know. It's not like a house that, like, it doesn't roll out the tongue. Picman House. This is up in Salem. I got most of my information from this house from ghosttours.com, which is the Salem Ghost Tour site, which has a tremendous amount of information on anything Salem. So if you're interested, I'd check it out. They do a good job. Okay. So the Picman House is located at 43 Charter Street over in Salem, and it was built by Samuel Picman in 1665. The land in which the dwelling stands was bought by Picman in 1657. He is thought to be the original owner of the home, since the estate inventory mentions the house is in this spot. But the property, while he could have built it, it could have been built by his father, who was a carpenter. That part kind of confused me. I didn't know if they were saying like his father built it for him, or he paid his dad, or maybe his dad built it first. I don't know. But what I do know is that he bought it, and then like 8 years later, a house shows up. So in 1964, the house was purchased by the Historic Salem Incorporated with the intent to preserve its history and unique architectural style. The company began restorations but was unable to finish it. A few years later, in 1969, the property was sold to Philip A. Boudreaux, who completed the full restoration. In the late 1970s, tours were conducted showcasing the inside of the property. At that time, this is creepy. Each one of the rooms had a button-activated mannequin along with 17th
That's awesome.
century
That's so awesome.
paraphernalia. Ooh, creepy. Each mannequin represented a historical figure, depicting scenes and narrating stories that pertain to the house. During this time, the Red Barn, besides the house, operated as a gift store. While tours were being conducted throughout the home, the layout consisted of 3 bedrooms, 1 on the first floor and 2 on the second floor, a kitchen, and an attic that had been converted into the curator's quarters. There was no mention of a bathroom or living room in the area.
Who needs bathrooms or living rooms?
In 1983, the house was purchased by the Peabody Essex Museum to conserve the historical significance of the site, and is still owned by them today. Among the many people that once called the Picman House its home was French painter Michel Felice Cornet. It's a guy. The artist was famous for his beautiful marine paintings, murals, and portraits. However, his most important accomplishment was, do you know what it was? He was known for introducing the tomato to the New World. In the early 1800s, when he arrived in Salem, he noticed no one was eating tomatoes. At that time, people, or like, I guess people like white people from New England, thought the fruit was poisonous. He grew up in Italy, and he knew that eating tomatoes was great. He decided to prove they were safe by consuming them on his stoop, like in front of the whole town to see. So at first, everyone thought he was a big weirdo, because he was just sitting on his stoop eating tomatoes, which is like kind of weird, you know, like you just walk by some guy eating tomatoes all day, especially when like everyone's like, don't eat tomatoes. And I used to hear about this too, like out in the Midwest of the country, like people would have like these sideshows where they would go and eat tomatoes because everyone thought they were poisonous. It'd be like, oh, here's the fantastic like Marie, and he can eat tomatoes. And everyone would be like, because everyone thought they were poisonous because they were red.
Weird.
You never heard of this before?
No.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. They never were poisonous. People just thought they were poisonous because they were red. Okay.
Which makes sense.
There was a local legend surrounding the house, and some people think it's true and some people think it's not true, but it's a legend. Okay. So a family of 3 moved into the home, a man, his wife, and his 7-year-old daughter. Shortly after settling in, the man's mental health began to deteriorate, declining each day until he reached a point of insanity. He claimed he could see and hear demons in the home. In his struggle to fight the evil entities that plagued his existence, he became increasingly irritable. His violent outbursts would horrify his family, each one more jarring than the one before. One day, he chained his daughter to the attic. She defecated and urinated all over herself while starving, alone, and frightened. Each day, she waited for death to release her from the pestilent confinement. I stole that line directly from ghosttours.com. I just thought it was a great line. His wife was petrified. and didn't know, like, did she want to protect her daughter? Does she want to like talk to her husband and then end up also being in there? I'd protect my daughter. But putting her fears aside, she begged her husband to release the child, but her pleas did not go answered. Instead, he freaked out and got annoyed with her and gathered rope and tied her to a tree and then took a big, large block of wax and melted it and threw it on her. Yeah, and that's how she died. Slowly.
That's the wife.
Suffocated by wax.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And this poor girl is still chained up in the attic.
Correct. So, once she drowned in because the wax hardened around her and that's how she died. So after that happened, he hung himself in the house. He went in and did that. And so there were 3 deaths that all happened at the same time. These 3 girls, 3 people, but the spirit of the girl is the one everyone sees. And so while snapping photos of the building, visitors capture what looks to be a girl staring out of the 2nd-story window. And employees at the museum across the street claim to hear disembodied voices at night, particularly the voice of a child. Aside from that, strange sightings of the girl, pictures have also captured orbs and human faces floating around inside of the house. And that's the story.
Wow.
That's the Picman House.
That's horrifying.
I know, right?
So maybe it was the tomatoes that made him do it.
Maybe.
All right. Next up, because Beth is not very good at following directions, I have a street. So this is more of a haunted drive than necessarily one particular house. I like variety. So we're going to talk about Dudley Road in Billerica. So it's an old country road between Route 3 and the Concord River. Dudley Road gets a good amount of thrill-seeking traffic from local teenagers looking to get a glimpse of the spirits that haunt the road. But before we get into the details of the spooky stuffs on the street, can we take a moment to talk about respect for private property? Dudley Road is full of homes where people, live. And some of these homes have horses that live there. And some have large gardens. But they're all private property, except the condemned house that we're going to talk about. So if you go to Dudley Road to try to see something paranormal, don't be a nuisance to the people who live there. Don't block the road. Don't go on people's property. And I think it goes without saying, but don't break into people's horse stables or vandalize anything. Keep it classy, people. Thank you for coming.
Does that happen by people a lot?
Yes.
Looking at the haunted house?
Yes. I was reading a big, long blog post that had a bunch of commenters who came on and they're like, I live on the street and I call the police on all of these people. And people were talking about the fact that their horse stables had been broken into and, just general, like people would come along and leave like, piles of garbage in their yards. And it just general dumbassery, right? Like,
my aunt lives in Billerica.
But that's just thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Please respect other people's property, right? It just goes without saying. So what are the people flocking to Dudley Road for? For the nuns. That's right. Ghost nuns. They're the big attraction here. And it's not just one nun or one event that left the imprints of the nuns on Dudley Road. No. There are several nuns and several stories about how they all got there. So there was a convent for the Daughters of St. Paul located on Dudley Road in the early 1800s. And a few of the faithful sisters decided that they were ready to switch their allegiance and began secretly practicing witchcraft. They held satanic masses in a house across the street from the convent. And as luck would have it, the nuns were found out. They were not given a trial. Instead, the local citizens presumed them guilty and set out to put the nuns to death. A few of the nuns made a run for it, but were caught in a field behind the convent. The 3 nuns were hanged in that field, and the nuns who hadn't run out were put to death back in the convent. The house where they were practicing their witchcraft seems to miss the nuns. It's begun sinking into the ground. There are voices that come from the house at night, and weird smells come from the house during the day. But the condemned house has supposedly sunk into the ground up to the 2nd-story windows. So the entire first floor of this house is now supposedly gone. So there's another version of this story.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
When a house sinks into the ground like that, is it like the first floor just like collapses or like it's just underground? Like, is there still a first floor under the 2nd floor?
I think that each instance might be different. I think that it could be a matter of like the first floor kind of gives out, but I think if the whole house sinks, it's more a matter of it wasn't built on a strong enough foundation. And so the ground under it is either like soggy. And so it sinks, or it just wasn't solid enough. So the weight of the house is just pushing down. So if you were to go like climb in a window on the second floor and like go down onto the first floor, I think that it would probably still be there. And the basement would probably still be there underneath it as well. Can I tell you another version of the story?
Sure.
Instead of the house being where the nuns practiced their witchcraft, this version has the nuns practicing witchcraft in the field across from the convent. When the townspeople came upon the witch nuns practicing in the middle of the night, they hanged the nuns right there on the spot that very night. The house was built there many years later, on the very place where the witch nuns were hung and buried, and the house has always had problems once it was built. It was eventually abandoned and has been sinking into the ground ever since. But now I have yet another version of the story.
Okay.
So girls who became pregnant before marriage in the 30s, 40s, 50s were often shipped off to convents when it became impossible to hide the pregnancy anymore. The girls would have the baby at the convent and be forced to give the child up for adoption. And then following that, sometimes the girls were forced to become nuns themselves. And in this version of the story,
wait a minute. I'm sorry. Hold on.
Go ahead.
I'm not Catholic, but aren't nuns supposed to have never had done it?
Not being a Catholic either, but my understanding is that once a nun takes the vow to be a nun, that's really when it matters. But I think that once you officially decide to become a nun, then you're a nun.
Interesting.
Okay. All right. In this version of the story, there's no witchcraft being practiced and no vengeful townspeople. Just 3 young girls who'd been through a traumatic experience of pregnancy and having their child taken from them, and then being forced into a certain human slavery against their will. And they couldn't take it. So they made a pact, and they all went out into the field one night and hung themselves. They were buried in the field with black wooden crosses. And then the house was built there years later and began to stink, and eventually started sinking into the ground. This is crazy. Do you want to hear a 4th version of the story?
Yes.
I love when there's this story and there's just so many different versions of it, because it just shows like how great urban legends are. All right. So this one includes an escaped lunatic from a local insane asylum.
Wow.
And in this version, the escaped lunatic is looking for shelter and finds his way to the convent. He goes on a murderous rampage, slitting the throats of the nuns in the convent, and then chasing down the 3 nuns who escaped and hanging them in the field across the street.
Whoa.
So it was just really interesting to me that in every version of this story, it's 3 nuns. That they might have been there before the house, they might have been there after the house, but it's always 3 nuns. And I just found that so telling in how stories spread. The original version of the story, I heard in my research for this, I saw things that were like, oh, there wasn't even a convent there until the 70s. You know, there was nothing there in the 1800s or in the 1950s, or, you know, so it's just a really interesting look at how this story has kind of changed and evolved over the years. But either way, there's still a condemned house on Dudley Road that causes a lot of problems. It stinks. There's always like this smell that comes from it. Sometimes it's like a dirty, you know, just not like a wholesome earthy smell, but like a dirty earthy smell. Sometimes it's like a methane, like stinky fart smell. Sometimes it smells like burning human flesh. I'm like, I don't know what's going on in that house, but that sounds terrible. There are unexplained lights that show up all around it in the field. Screams can be heard coming from the house. Many people talk about how their cars will just die when they drive past the house. Their car radio will stop working. And people who get out of their cars in that area, or just happen to think it would be fun to walk down Dudley Road, say they feel a presence watching them, or in some cases following them. Okay. One of the accounts that I read was about some teenagers who were dared by one of the fathers to walk the whole road at night. I mean, the whole road's not that long. It's like a mile and a half or so. And the father said he would meet them at the other end. And so the teens were walking along, and as they got closer to the end of the walk and they caught a glimpse of the dad waiting in his car at the end of the road, they heard footsteps running up behind them, but they couldn't see anybody. So they started running for the end of the road like their lives depended on it. And they had just made it and run past the dad waiting there when the dad was hit in the chest by some unseen force and knocked down as he stood there.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they all got in the car and sort of beat it really fast and just drove home, and apparently never talked about it again until they told this story. So that was just an interesting story about that house. Okay. So those are like the three nuns, right? The stories about them. So then we have another story about a nun who lived at the convent. She fell in love with the priest who served there. And you know where this story is going, right?
He got her pregnant.
Of course. Right? They managed to make the baby together, but instead of accepting the consequence of their actions, leaving the church and raising the child together, instead, what do you think happens? The priest denies the kid, is like, nope, not mine. And the pregnant nun hangs herself on a large tree on the property.
Oh,
yeah. So the tree is still there, and people report seeing a noose hanging from a branch from time to time. Like they'll drive by and be like, there's a noose there. And then they turn around and come back, no noose.
Wow.
Right. But it's happened to enough people that it's certainly worth pointing out. Another nun ghost story. Sometime in the 1950s, one of the nuns was just out for a walk on the road, nice day, walking along. She gets hit by a car. The impact throws her into a tree and she dies. So since that time, people have seen her ghost standing at the tree where she died, which is not the enormous tree with the noose on it, but a different tree. All right. And others have stopped to offer help, right? They see a nun standing there randomly on the side of the road. So they're like, hey, can I help you? Because, nuns are typically good people. She disappears, just gone. And they're like, maybe it's time to go. And there are other people who stop and ask, does she need some help? And she doesn't disappear. And in fact, she just turns to them and asks for directions to the convent.
Cool.
So, yeah, strange. So these nuns, as you might guess, are a real hazard on Dudley Road. There were 3 different accounts that I read of people driving down Dudley Road and a nun just walks out in front of them and crosses the road. So 2 of the accounts, they watched it happen from a distance, and the nun comes out of the brush on the side of the road closer to the river and just kind of like glides, not walks, glides across the road and just goes into the field on the other side. Right. And the third story was there's this driver and he's looking into the field when a nun suddenly appears on his left, which is the driver's side, and paid his moving car no attention. She just walks right in front of him, right over to the right side, and just disappears, like fades out as she walks into the field. Right. Like crazy. So I can say with absolute certainty that had I been driving that car, I would need new underwear. Absolutely.
It's really scary.
Yeah. So if you want to see if anything will chase you, or if there's anything smelly near the sinking house, or if your car will lose power, or if a nun will walk out in front of you, take a trip down Dudley Road in Billerica. But don't be a nuisance to the people who live there, or the shadow-faced farmer might get you. He's another spirit that frequents Dudley Road. He's a big guy. Nobody can see his face. It's always in shadow, no matter how bright the lights are, or his face just appears featureless. I haven't seen him myself, so I'm not really qualified to make the call here. But if you see him, keep going. He has a menacing feeling to him, and people who have seen him leave quickly. I couldn't find any reports of anyone talking to him or interacting at all, just that people see him and there's a malevolence to him that makes them just want to go somewhere else. So, yeah, that's Dudley Road in Billerica, Massachusetts.
Cool.
Yes, very cool. And it would be a free trip. I love free.
Any of you guys live in Billerica, right into the show. Go send it to gmail.com. You ever seen a ghost nun? We want to hear about it.
Yeah. Or the farmer with no face.
Or a farmer with no face.
Definitely want to hear about him.
My favorite part about the farmer with no face is when you're like, people just run because he feels like malevolent.
Yeah.
He also has no face. I'd run if I saw someone with no face.
He's a scary dude.
I wouldn't even
Yep.
I
No,
wouldn't care if
nobody
he felt
wants
great. I wouldn't want to be around someone like that.
Right. Nothing to do with him.
Nope.
All right. What do you got?
My next story is the Salem Witch's House. Located at 310 Essex Street in the McIntyre Historic District of Salem, you will find the Witch House. If you've ever seen a photo of Salem, Massachusetts, you've probably seen this. It's a super famous all-black house. You might think it has its name for being a giant black house, as typically black houses in a New England-style home are referred to as a witch house. But the name actually comes from the fact it's the only surviving structure with direct ties to the Salem witch trials. The witch house itself has never had a witch live there, but it was home to Judge Jonathan Corwin, who executed 19 people charged with witchcraft. The foundation of the home was established to be built sometime between 1620 and 1642 by Richard Davenport. The Davenports were a prominent family in the 17th century Salem, with Richard Davenport arriving in America in 1628. Richard married Elizabeth Hawthorne, who is a relative of Jonathan Hawthorne. Richard Davenport became the second in command to the Captain Trask in 1637 and the keeper of the castle for Boston Harbor by the 1640s. Struck by lightning in 1665, Richard Davenport left the Davenport name to his son Nathaniel. In 1975, Nathaniel fought and died at the Narragansett Indian Fort during King Philip's War. Jonathan Corwin purchased the witch house from the Davenport's estate that same year. So when this guy, Jonathan Corwin, bought the house, the foundation was unfinished. So he then had the partial construction remodeled by this guy named Daniel Andrews, improving a 4-bedroom house with 6-foot stone walled cellar, underpinning, and steps. A building contract from February 19, 1675 reveals the witch house was likewise renovated to include 5 additional fireplaces on each floor of the 2.5-story structure. Later, he would be accused of witchcraft by Thomas and Nathaniel Putnam. Andrews was embroiled in the 1692 prosecutions. Andrews was, however, acquitted of witchcraft by the Reverend Cotton Mather and was selected to replace Putnam Paris parties in the Salem Committee. Corwin's participation in Andrews' acquittal is undocumented, although many believe that Corwin persuaded the prosecution. Although less known than the hanging judge, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Jonathan Corwin supervised the pretrial examinations for the Salem witch trials. Corwin was appointed to replace Judge Nathaniel Stellenstall as the Court of Oyer and Terminer, with Stellenstall resigning from the court after the execution of Bridget Bishop. Jonathan Corwin was an impressive replacement. Corwin had been twice elected to the Colonial Assembly a decade before. The Corwin surname added additional effect as Corwin's father, George, had been a high-profile shipbuilder, merchant, and general court representative. His dad was kind of known as like a no-nonsense, but also super superstitious guy, but he had a lot of money and people knew him. So it was like good to have him as your dad. There's a story that there were some people like immigrants, I guess, even though everyone was an immigrant at that time. But
I know. I was wondering why you put quote marks around that.
That's why, because like it was like the 1600s, like everyone was. So they were there and they were at the shipyard and the dad found them and he made them get like naked and search them for like marks of them being a witch, but couldn't find any. So made them just like hang out at the shipyard till a boat came and took them back to their country.
They must have used some sort of witchcraft to take those marks off.
Right? What the heck?
Yeah.
Okay. So from 1684 to 1690, Jonathan and Elizabeth Corwin had 5 new children and they all died.
Oh.
Yeah. John, born in 1684, died within 9 weeks of age. Margaret, born in 1685, died at 6 months of age. Anna, born in 1687, lived longer than her siblings, but suffered a premature death at the age of 19. 2 additional deaths would occur by 1690, with the loss of Jonathan Corwin Jr. by his 3rd month and Herbert by his 8th week. Jonathan and Elizabeth continued to inhabit the home until 1717, but by then the house was overseen by their son, Reverend George Corwin. His oversight was interrupted by his untimely death when a fever claimed him. And then a year later, the same fever took his wife, and then the fever also ended up taking Jonathan and Elizabeth. So the only people who were left were these 2 young boys, George Jr. and Samuel.
Was it scarlet fever?
I just said fever.
Oh.
So the witch house underwent further renovations from 1720 to 1760 as New Englanders adopted an English Georgian style. The gramble roof was added by 1747, updating the 17th century witch house to the fashions of the 18th century. After the American War of Independence, through the federal architecture that was added, such as a federal style carriage and fence, which no longer stand today. By the 19th century, the witch house included an Italianated style drugstore and one-story addition. These additions were later removed by the Salem Historic Incorporated, a preservation organization, and the witch house was restored to its 17th century appearance. The historic Salem likewise relocated the house 35 feet to the west, saving the witch house from demolition. North Street, or State Route 144, was to be widened to accommodate traffic. The expansion of North Street would sacrifice the witch house. Citizens collected $42,000 for the relocation of both the witch house and the neighboring Bowdwitch House, the former residence of the founder of the modern maritime navigation. So they moved it 35 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
That sounds like a better plan than trying to, I don't know, ship it across Plymouth Harbor on a barge.
I guess. And $42,000 to move 2 houses.
What year was this?
35 feet. It was in the 19th century.
Well, I don't think that it's the distance that you're moving it that costs money. I think it's prepping it, jacking it up on a truck, and then dropping it somewhere else.
I know, it's crazy.
I don't think that they charge by the mile. Also, I liked how earlier you called somebody the keeper of the castle, and I would like to be referred to that at some point.
King of castle, king of castle. I have chair. Borat. Paul and I say that a lot whenever we get something. So, Salem's historic preservation project continued from 1944 to 1948, allowing Salem to refurbish the witch house as a museum. By 1948, the witch house was open to the public. Olivia Bogart, whose father restored and relocated the home, later recalled the excavation of the property upon where the witch house first stood. Bones were found, but the bodies of the poor souls who had perished were never identified. So 5 years after now we're going back in time. 5 years after the witch trials happened, the general court ordered residents fast in atonement for their participation in the trials. The trials weren't declared unlawful until 1702, however, and reparations were attempted by 1711. The bill was passed to restore the names of those affected. The colony likewise granted £600 in restitution for the heirs. It wasn't until 1957 that Massachusetts issued a formal apology for the Salem witch trials. And at that point, who are they apologizing to?
Everybody.
I mean, what is that? I don't know. That's it. That. So 1957. Okay. So inside the wall of the witch house, you can still find a black shoe.
Ooh, a black shoe.
Indeed. A superstitious ritual to ward off witches. There are also witch bottles, which people will remember from earlier this season. Our season opener, we discussed these. A counter magical instrument containing urine, hair, pins, and fingernails. A witch bottle, like a black shoe, would protect the house from evil. But unlike the black shoe, the witch bottle would capture evil before expelling evil. The urine was thought to attract a witch, and the pins were thought to catch and contain her. It's a little confusing, but
why would urine attract a witch?
I don't know.
That's gross.
It's way gross. So it's really confusing how it's written online. I guess I should just go. I think that the witch bottles were original to the house. I don't think it's just something people added as a Salem thing. So the witch house also has a poppet, a doll used for spell casting or sympathetic magic. And the poppet was found in the house of Bridget Bishop. So people think it might also just have the energy from the trial period because she was the first person executed. So visitors at the witch house today hear disembodied voices and feel chills and see an unseen specter. Whatever that means. I don't know what that means.
Maybe they feel an unseen specter.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe they sense, taste, smell, hear. If it's unseen, you could use any of your senses except see.
That's what I mean. But maybe it's the wind. That's it. That's the story.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a black shoe and put it in the wall of my house.
There you go.
I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'll make it
I
work.
don't either. All right.
Either that or maybe I'll fill up a little bottle with pee and some hair and pins, throw it in the wall.
There you go.
Yeah, never have to look at it again. It's always there. Good story.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that we had some good stories this week.
I agree.
Do we have anything else that you want to talk about, Amelia?
We do, yes.
I know you have lots of other stuff to talk about.
Okay. So, Beth, you will recall a couple weeks ago when I said how Jonathan, one of our listeners, aka Kung Fu Sun, saw that crazy cemetery over on Route 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and remember, I was like, I read what he said and I was like, okay, so like if anyone else sees it, write into the show, let us know. Like, if you know anything about this, do you know anything about it? Have you ever seen anything about it? Like, if anyone knows anything, tell us.
And I'm going to guess that people told you stuff.
It comes from Cassie. Okay. Hi. Sorry. This is what she writes. Hi. Sorry to bother again, but I just listened to the episode when someone wrote in about the graves on the side of Route 1. So I have relatives who are buried on the side of Route 1. They're there because their family farm used to be there. And when they died, they were buried on the farm. Their name is Malton, and it was my grandmother's sister's family. One time her sister was driving by and she actually saw them bulldozing over the graves. So she pulled over and raised hell, and they replaced the gravestones with a new stone. I believe it's right by the gas station and the Chinese restaurant. I think it's called Green Tea.
That's crazy.
Yes,
wait, the restaurant's called Green Tea?
Yes.
Okay.
That turns out to not be the place Kung Fu Sun was talking about the first time he sent this in.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Last night, Paul takes me out to Chinese dinner. We are at a Chinese restaurant, not Green Tea, different one. I get a message from Jonathan, aka Kung Fu Sun. He sends me, Beth, you will look, this photo of another graveyard on Route 1.
Oh.
Coming out of Green Tea on Route 1, right down the street from the Gulf Station. And my wife screams, and I was like, what? She goes, look, it's another cemetery.
Bum, bum, bum.
This one is way smaller, around 4 graves. And he's going to do some research. And I'm like fascinated. What is with all these grave sites over on Route 1?
So look at that.
The other one he had found is called the Dowdy Cemetery. Okay. It's over by some gas station. Let's see, because he told us it was at one gas station. Then he said his wife corrected him. So it's a Shell gas station over on Route 1. There's the Dowdy Cemetery. So what? It's like crazy. I'm fascinated by this. If anyone else, and we already got one person, if anyone else knows anything about all these tiny little cemeteries over on Route 1, let us know. And not only that, this is coming into us on the day we're doing North Shore stuff.
Right. It's, it's Kismet.
Kismet.
I don't know what Kismet is. It just sounded right.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great word.
So what else you got?
So our first email comes to us from Dan. Good afternoon. I'm definitely a huge fan of the podcast, and I binge listened the last 2 weeks. I'm a microbiologist for the state of New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services COVID response team. Cool.
Very cool. Thanks for all your help with that.
Thank you so much. I tried leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, but I'm not sure how. I'll see if I have it in my account. It's still accessible since I haven't used it in many months. I'm an INFJ, HSP, empath with seemingly medium tendencies. I have probably 4 decades of stories to share, but several that stick out in my mind. I think this was heightened when I became a massage therapist and a Reiki practitioner. What's the cutoff number of short ghost stories, both human and animal, I can share via email? Looking forward to hearing back from you. Sincerely, Dan. Cool. Nice.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for listening. We look forward to your stories.
Yeah. And I told him that there wasn't a limit. And last I heard from him, he was up to page 7. So we have a whole bunch coming to us from him.
We are probably going to do a whole episode on Dan stories.
Yeah. And he's an INFJ.
I don't know what that means.
Yes, you do. Because I'm an INFJ and we've talked about this. And it is the Myers-Briggs personality thing.
But what does it mean to be an INFJ?
It is the rarest personality type. Paul and I are both INFJs. It's less than 1% of the population. So we always say that that's why Paul and I get along, is because we both have this like super weird personality. But it stands for intuitive, functioning, judgmental. I don't know. What does yours stand for? Do you know?
I don't remember which one mine is. I'm George Washington.
You're George Washington. I'm Alanis Morissette. Woo! Isn't it ironic? Okay, so anyway, next.
No, it would be ironic if I was Alanis Morissette. It's not ironic that you're Alanis Morissette.
No, it's not. It's not. INFJs, everyone thinks they're really standoffish and really mean, but it's just because they're in their own heads and they have no idea why people think that. And that if that is not the epitome of me, I don't know what is. Okay, next. This next story comes to us from Erica. Drive-by ghostings. Hi, Amelia and Beth. I'm a recent follower of your podcast and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm a New Englander through and through and can't really imagine living anywhere else. I also really like a good ghost story, so your podcast is just perfect for me. I figured I would send along my childhood ghost stories for your drive-by ghostings. These happened in Marlborough, Massachusetts in the 1970s when I was very small, around 4 or 5 years old. My paternal grandfather used to come into my room at night and watch me sleep. He never stayed long and would stand in the corner of the room by the closet and just watch. The disturbing part of this was that he was dead. He died when I was 4, but would still visit me. I was his only grandchild, so I'm not surprised. But I really didn't understand what was happening and was terrified. I tried explaining it to my parents, but they didn't believe me and would get mad at me because I ended up afraid in my bedroom and the second floor of the house. As time went on, he visited less and less, and I think I was around 8 when he visited for the last time. Though my paternal grandfather was gone, my mom was still alive. My great-grandmother, or Nana as we called her, lived just a few streets over. I was her only great-grandchild, and my dad was her only grandchild. We were the only living relatives left, and she was predeceased by her husband and all 3 of her children. She lived alone in a Queen Anne Revival-style house. When you went into the front door of the house, you ended up in the foyer and had 3 options for where to go. Left, you could walk through a wide doorway into the parlor. If you went straight, you went down a long hall into the kitchen. Right took you upstairs to the second floor. From my earliest days, I was blind terrified of those stairs. I knew there was something up there that did not belong. This was problematic as the only bathroom in the house was on the second floor. My parents, again, wouldn't believe me that there was something up there. I remember a few times I tried to go upstairs myself, but couldn't physically do it. The air would get hot and I couldn't breathe, and I felt like a weight was sitting on my chest and blocking me from moving. I would sit halfway up the stairs, straining to listen for the voices I knew were up there. Time went on, and Nana began to complain that she wasn't sleeping. We asked why, and she said because they were bothering her. We asked who, and she said they. Nana would not answer anymore. She just kept saying they. My dad asked neighbors if they saw anyone bothering her at night, and they said no. We thought she was starting to get some dementia as she was 93. One summer afternoon, my dad was visiting Nana. They were sitting in the parlor. Nana was facing the stairs, and my dad was sitting with his back to them. Suddenly, Nana goes, "Look, there they are," and pointed to the foot of the stairs. My dad turned around and got the shock of his life. He saw 3 columns of light at the foot of the stairs. They hovered about a foot off the floor. They were white and partially transparent. Their sides were not straight. They were like a zigzag shape. One was tall, 2 were short. My dad stared at them. They fled back up the stairs. Spooky.
Very.
That was the only time my dad saw them. Nana died soon after. We believed that the taller entity was her husband and the 2 shorter ones were her 2 daughters. All had died in the house. Though her son, my grandfather, was also dead. I don't think he was part of the haunting crew because he didn't die in the home and was busy hanging out in my bedroom. We ended up selling both Nana's house and our own and moving out of town. I don't know if my relatives are still in there, and I hope not. My dad is still alive, and I have been very clear with him that even though his father, grandfather, and aunts all haunted their living relatives, I'm okay with him breaking this particular family tradition when he passes on. Hope you enjoyed my story. Erica. P.S. Darn it, do some Western Mass ghost stories. We have ghosts out here too, you know, and excellent donuts.
Oh, we're sold, Erica. Totally sold. We'll try to work in some
Oh.
Western Mass some Western Mass ghosty donuts soon. Donuts.
And next, we got a whole bunch of stories from Marie. And she sent some through the website. She sent us some more in our email. And I want to kind of give them the time they deserve. Beth and I decided we're going to do them on another episode. Thank you so much, Marie. Okay, so let's first start looking at our reviews on Audible. This review is entitled A Riveting Episode About Past Life Regression. 5-star overall, 5-star performance, 5-star story. Beth and Amelia, you've done another great service by presenting the work of Peyton Pugmire of Creative Spirit. I was captivated by the description of your own past life hypnotherapy sessions, resulting in 2 completely different experiences. I've enjoyed every episode of your podcast, but this one was just fascinating from beginning to end. I might just sign up for a session. Your interviews keep getting better and better. Can't wait to hear the next episode. Happy hunting from Barry Corbett of the Boston Paranormal Investigators.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry.
Every message Barry gives us just like fills me up with just brightness and happiness. And we love you, Barry. You're great. Our next review, title, Super. 5-star overall, 5-star performance, 5-star story. So great. Always amazing. I love listening to this podcast. I learn new things. I laugh and I get spooked. And you didn't sign off, so we can't say thank you to you by name, but thank you very much. That is very encouraging.
We're glad you think we're super. We think you're super too.
You are superstar. You're a superstar. That is what you are. Our next review comes to us from the Apple iTunes store. This one is entitled Addictive Show. A must listen. This show is informative, entertaining, and full of wonderful stories. Amelia and Beth are truly gifted storytellers. Love you, ladies. Carol McPhail of Pentagram Shop. P.S. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. I said this in our show opener, but Carol gave me a reading one time and it was fantastic. And congratulations to Pentagram. Today is their 1-year anniversary of being in business.
Oh, yay. Congratulations.
Our next review comes from Rockaville Red. Title, Ghost Hunting in New England. Love every episode. Hi, ladies. Thanks for the shout out. Great episode, as always, yesterday. Well, thank you so much, Rockaville Red. That was very encouraging.
Thanks, Rockaville Red.
Rockaville Red. I don't care about history. Rock, high school. Anything else, Beth?
Oh, I have very exciting news. You know how last week Amelia surprised me with a trip to the Alden House on October 22nd. We're going to go. And I had said that Sean is probably not going to join us. Well, he told me today that actually he's very excited to go.
Whoa.
Which I thought was just terrific. He's like, this will be super fun. You know,
it
let's
will be
go.
Super fun.
Yeah. And I even made us reservations at the Sun Tavern. So our Halloween episode this year might be a recap of any spooky stuff that happens to us.
Whoa.
No promises, but it might be a footnote on another episode.
It might be. Cool. Thanks, Beth. That's going to be great. We're going to have a lot of fun.
I think we are.
You can reach us online at ghosthuntinginNewEngland.com, Facebook.com/ghosthuntinginNewEngland, Twitter/ghosthuntingNE. Find us on Instagram at ghosthuntinginnewengland, or send us your drive-by ghostings, or just say hi at ghosthuntinginnewengland@gmail.com. Send us your 5-star reviews on iTunes and your 15-star reviews over on Audible. We are 2 reviews away on Apple iTunes from 111 reviews. 111. So leave us 555. That's all I got. And as always,
happy hunting.
Good episode.
Yay. Hang on, Bobby's calling me. I don't know what he wants. I was just there. Hello, Bob.
Hello. Do we have stars?
I think we might. It would be on like the regular TV, though. You know, I'm recording the podcast right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you're now on the podcast.
Hello, podcast.
Say, leave 5 stars for Mummy and Amelia. Good talk, Bob. All right,
You're
I'll talk.
gonna have to pay me for that.
Ho, ho, ho. All right, in that case, goodbye.
Bye.
Did you hear that? I have to pay him.